great looking group out here. How many have been here all day? Wonderful. How many of this is your first story experience? Well, welcome to Charleston Tells. Ira sat at the table on his birthday, surrounded by his family. He took a deep breath and blew out the candles. When the singing was done, he announced, "I have applied to Harvard Medical School." There was silence at the table. And then there were whispers. "Grandpa's gone crazy. What's he talking about?" Ira was 85 years old. And he said to his family, "I always wanted to go to medical school, but life got in the way." Ira lived a good life, and he would walk around Cambridge and along the Charles River, and he would look over at the campus, and he would say, "Someday I'm going to Harvard Medical School." So when he was 85, he applied. His family did think he'd gone off his rocker a bit, but they figured he's 85, he can do what he wants to do. Months went by. The family was gathered at another wonderful Sunday afternoon dinner after church, and Ira looked at them all and said, holding up a letter, "I've been accepted." Well, now they really could not believe this was happening, and he passed the letter around the table. "Dear Ira, you have been accepted into the Harvard Medical School Anatomical Gifts Program." What? Ira had decided he was going to get into medical school no matter what it took. And so he planned it all out. And when he passed, he would go to medical school. I heard Ira's story 2 years ago when I was attending a medical school memorial service at Tufts University, where my father had been an anatomical gifts donor. Ira's story was told by his granddaughter, who had been sitting at the birthday dinner that day when Ira announced, "I'm going to medical school." It was amazing to listen to that story. And as I sat there and listened to the stories of the lives of the 60 donors that had given to science that year, I thought, wow, the world is full of stories. After the memorial service was completed, we were invited to go upstairs and walk down a long hallway where the medical students had asked the families to send photos and mementos of their family member, and then to go to a banquet and have a meal with the students who had worked on your particular family member. As I walked down that corridor, and you could see now the stories in pictures that lined that hallway. It was amazing. And I looked at my father's pictures of the log cabin we had built in the woods, the time he spent sailing. And I walked into that room and sat down at table number 33 with my mother and my siblings. And we sat there, and suddenly we were surrounded at the table by 6 medical students who sat down with us. And these were the students that worked on my father's body and learned all about human anatomy so that they could be doctors. And at first, honestly, it kind of creeped me out. But then we started asking questions about, how'd you decide to go to medical school, and what kind of medicine do you want to practice? And as I listened to these students tell their stories, I thought about my dad, who was a teacher. He was a teacher his whole life, and he was one of those teachers who was not a teacher from 8 to 4. He was a teacher 24/7, 365 days a year. He became a teacher of teachers, a profession that he loved and honored in everything that he did. And I looked at these students and I thought, my father is still a teacher long after his last breath. It warmed my heart. And as we left that banquet hall and I walked down that hallway of all those stories that surrounded me, and I thought about Ira, who didn't get to medical school until he was a body donor. And I thought, how many lost dreams are on this hall? How many are in this room? And I began to think, what did I want to be when I was a kid? And then I remembered that when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I had it all planned out. And then I told my oldest brother, Brian, who was 14 years older than me, and I thought he was a big egghead and probably the smartest person I knew, and I told him that I was going to be a professional wrestler. And he looked at me and said, "That is ridiculous." He said, "Wrestling's not real, it's just fake. Be a boxer, that's at least real, I'll train you." And I looked at Brian and thought, seriously? I don't think so. And then he said to me, "Marty, you know all those little stories you're always telling us? Why don't you write those down? Be a writer." I said, "Okay, I'll be a writer." My father had overheard the conversation, and that night he gave me my first little notebook and a pen, and I started writing. I wrote all kinds of stories and filled that notebook, and filled notebook after notebook after notebook after notebook, all through elementary school and middle school and high school. And in high school, when all my friends wanted to be doctors and lawyers and such, I wanted to be Irma Bombeck. And I went to college and I thought, I'm going to major in English and I'm going to write. And I started writing until I took a certain professor who will remain nameless creative writing course. And she quickly pronounced that I didn't really have much skill for writing. And I stopped writing. And I didn't write for 20 years. I kept on telling my stupid little stories, I must say. I cannot keep my mouth shut. But I stopped writing. Until about a year before my father died, he said to me, "Marty, write your stories." And he gave me a pen and a notebook. And I started writing again. And I thought, wow, there are still stories everywhere. My father's still a teacher. There are dream stealers everywhere, beware. But think about, what's your story? What's your story going to be told long after you're gone? Make your life story-worthy, because people will tell your stories. And you want them to be good. So as I look out in this room, I see the stories of lives well lived, troubles that have been overcome, challenges that we deal with every day. And that is what sharing our stories is all about, is sharing who we are and where we're going. And I'm so glad you came to Charleston Tells to be on that journey with all of us.